So we'll start with the first item which we're going to talk about is the carry forward discussion. Everybody received a packet, and we started this last week a little bit, and hopefully everybody had a chance to review in detail the carry forward and have their questions or answered some of their questions with respect to the carry forward. I guess I'll start off because I just have a few questions dealing with the different numbers and why they're there in general. And the first question I have in general, I guess, Keith, some of the 2012 to 13 carry forward encumbrances, carry forward that has been encumbered for some purpose, I take it that the department head wants to use it for, they've already designated. I guess, shouldn't the requested reappropriation carry forward be equal to or greater than that number?
No. The encumbrances are not included in the carry forward because encumbrances automatically carry into the next year under the budget law and procedure. That's because if a department head gets a purchase order, gets all the proper approvals from council, they have the appropriation, the authorization, they get a purchase order, we give a contract to a vendor, it can't be undone the following year.
So the question would be the
reappropriate
carry forward, for example, would be, let's take computer electronics. So we have 91,000 requested carry forward plus 124. So technically, they have encumbered 124, and they're going to get an additional 91. So that's whatever that is, 13,000 or whatever, 215,000.
Right. Both would be added on, right?
Both are added together. Okay, because like if you get to water fund, they got 466 plus another 530 on top of that. So that's $1 million, almost $1.1 million that you have. So you have 530,000. Do you have any plans for the 530 or?
South Court Tower, we have all kinds of projects going on. So.
But that those have been encumbered because South Court Tower was a while ago, and I thought it was 125,000.
It was part of that carryover discussion.
But has it been encumbered?
I don't believe so. 175,000.
125,000.
I want to say 175, but
We just had a
125.
just had a water meeting that talked about 5-year projects.
again,
They don't have all the money that they need to pay for those projects.
Okay, there's 530,000 available. So they're gonna, in your committee, did you designate projects and that's gonna happen, or?
Yeah. Patrick gave us a 5-year plan, which is gonna be passed to utility rate review, and
Now what about,
there's additional funds needed.
since I'm on Nino, what about sanitation, 403,000?
sanitation, we talked about buying a truck. We haven't purchased a truck in a few years.
So that
We need a
hasn't been-
truck, and they're at 200,000 apiece. We have another truck that we think is a lemon. So
And since we're on you, what about the 194,000 for building, public maintenance and buildings? What are you using that for?
that I believe we only asked for 38,000 for carry forward.
Public building maintenance?
Yes.
Why do we have 194 in there?
Being frugal.
But I mean,
I think part of that.
did we already take it out? Because you have, there's 38,000 that's encumbered already. And did the building get paid out of that, Keith? Are we done with the building already with that one? There's none of this as a saving up for the building of the 194?
For what building?
The
City
garage, city garage.
We paid for that out of 301.
Well, he was saving for it in his account. So can we take some of your money and put it back in the 301?
You can't put it back into 301, it's in general fund.
Well, he was saving money for his garage, I guess,
Correct.
correct? So how much was it of this 194 is for the garage?
Going back, I think it was like 176, I think, in 1 year.
So I guess the question is, we don't want to use that out of 301 is if he was saving for his garage, which you did for a couple of years.
We did.
So we want to take whatever money that he was saving for his garage and pay for the garage.
For since it's paid for.
We're not going to give you the money back. I mean, maybe they want to. I mean, what do you guys want to do? Since the money he saved for the garage was not spent on the garage, what do you want to do with that money?
You're in public buildings?
I know,
Yes.
I guess that's what.
None of this, none of this carry forward is in the buildings and structures line, which would be for the garage. Only 35,000 is in capital altogether, and that's street resurfacing. which I think is,
Yeah, that's, we can't touch that.
yeah, so. I
We need
know
that for the
plans
parking
that.
lots, the seal coating, and the resurfacing of the city lots.
Right?
That has to stay.
But none of this is on the buildings and structures.
Yeah,
line.
where's all the money that was saved then? You said, I remember you had a bunch of money in there, where'd that go? Cause it was like 400,000, I thought.
At one time.
Where did it go? If he paid for it on a 301 account, where did the 400,000 go?
It's in the fund.
building out of 301, dude.
We paid for a portion of it out of mechanics fund, but the lion's share of it came out of general cap. I don't think we paid for any of it out of general fund. I think the mechanics fund was a fairly small portion, and the rest of it was 301.
And then the overages we took out of sanitation, water.
Look, I guess what the answer to the question would be, I mean, I guess the question would be, if you had 400,000, I mean, where did that, it's not showing up anymore, where, and then did it vanish, or where'd it go?
It's in the fund.
Well then, oh, it's not carried forward, it just went back into the fund.
Correct. I'm
No,
thinking.
no, it was already, because the current carry forward available in that fund is 510. And the requested is only 194. They didn't request it. I mean,
Oh, so
that's your
it's in the
answer.
fund, okay, so
It-
my question would be, I think we were all under the impression that some of the money out of sanitation was paying for that garage, and we weren't gonna use the general purpose capital 301. How can we get some of this money out of sanitation back into 301? Or can't we do that?
It doesn't go, I don't know why you're saying back, because it
Well, not
never
back.
was in 301
How
to
can we,
begin with.
how can we take some money out of the enterprise fund and put it into the 301?
It's not enterprise, you're in public buildings. which is
Sanitation's already
general.
paid, Joe,
Slow
that's
down.
what.
You can transfer, council has the authority to transfer money from general fund to any fund they want to transfer to at any time. So if you want to take some money, if you want to say, hey, some of this money that we had in public buildings was gonna be for the garage, we want to move it to general capital, you have the authority to do that. The reason that I kind of cut for a second there when you said transferring from an enterprise fund,
Well,
is
right, I
you can't
thought-
transfer
right.
from an enterprise fund to another.
Well, he paid some of the
This
money out
was
of
paid.
sanitation for the
Correct.
garage. already.
Yes.
And you can transfer from general to an enterprise or to anything else.
So you want to reimburse maybe sanitation?
Well, either sanitation, or I also want to some of the money that's in general, I guess it doesn't really matter, but it should have came out of general purpose capital. But so we would want to reimburse sanitation and general purpose capital, I think, but, I mean, it's up to you guys.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Are we staying on
I
capital?
understand what you're saying, but remember,
He's on.
if you're short money in any fund other than general, you can cover it with a transfer from general fund. If you run out of money in general fund, that's a problem.
I understand.
So, I mean, I would be leery of making those transfers out of general fund, because if you tap the general fund out, there's nowhere to go.
Well,
If you
we're not
tap
gonna
one of the
tap it out, I
others
guess he
you
was
can always-
saving it for the garage, and that's what we bought into, I thought. That he was saving money, that he had 400 and some thousand towards the garage, and that's what we said, okay, we'll do the garage then, because you already saved some money. And, I mean, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I agree. Kathy, do you have the legislation handy on how we paid for it, how it's broken out? That cleared up right now for you.
On what?
The legislation.
No, I
See, if we had that
What
database that I
funds
spoke
paid
of,
for that?
now how we paid for the,
Not on me.
you can't pull it out of your back pocket?
It was 301 and 514, I mean, I don't have the exact allocation, check it.
But, no, I'm just talking to Nino right now, because this is what my issue was, just
Give me a
with respect to
second,
that. Everybody has their own issues. Mine was, looking at this, he saved up money for the garage, and I wanna make sure that the money that he saved up is used to pay for the garage. Because we're basing our decisions on how much is in the 301 account, making other decisions.
Sure.
The pool that you were talked about, we got the cemetery bill, I mean, all those come into play. So if he was supposed to pay 400,000 to the garage out of the public buildings fund that he saved, that would be an extra 400,000 that would be in the 301 account that we could do another project for.
But it sounds like it was never in the public buildings, was it, Keith? It was sitting in the general fund?
Well, there was appropriation, I mean, that's what we're talking about, where we had this $510,000 total appropriation in public buildings. If the justification for that in the past was, because last year, 11 into 12, we carried 425, and 10 into 11, we carried 417. And if the justification was that we might use that for the garage,
Right.
we ended up not using it for the garage because we were able to cover that out of 301. So if we're now saying, so that's why it's not requested now. The appropriation isn't.
So the question is, do you wanna just let it go back into the general fund and do nothing about it, or do you wanna reimburse, quote unquote, the 301 fund because it came out of the 301 fund, and we all thought it was gonna come out of Nino's carry forward? That's the question.
No, is the 301 fund needed? That's
How
the
many
next
projects do
question.
you wanna have?
Well,
I mean, that's our, we were designating, we had 5 projects out of 301 to use that money. So the question is, if you take the money away from the 301, we have less projects.
well, I mean, if this account doesn't need it, which obviously it seems like it doesn't, then we should allocate it
Not the
somewhere.
entire amount.
You're talking, the appropriation's already been not requested. Okay, the cash is not sorted by department, it's sorted by fund. The cash is in the general fund.
Right.
If you transfer cash from this fund, general fund, to 301, the point that I was trying to make earlier is that's irrevocable.
Right.
Okay, because you can transfer from general to another fund at any time. You can't transfer from another fund back to general with only certain limited exceptions. So the point that I was making there was, if you decide to do that, and 2 years from now, we're 5 years from now, we're short in general fund, you can't say, well, let's get that $400,000 back. If you
Right.
decide not to do it, and 4 years from now, we're short in the 301 fund, you can say, hey, well, let's do this now. That's the only thing I want you to consider about this is, the one way you can do anytime, the other way you can't.
So the only difference at the beginning, it was gonna come from the general fund.
Right, and then the other thing, I guess, Keith, I'm looking at is that we know we've got 5 projects, capital projects, we're gonna probably spend this money anyhow out of this, if it's there, once we move it back. So I understand what you're saying, that once you move it there, you can't move it back, but I'm thinking with 5 projects, it's going anyhow.
So my only question was, I can't remember the exact amount, and maybe we have to figure that amount out, but I know it was around 400,000. It wasn't the entire 510,
No,
I know that. I
no,
mean,
because we have elevator issues and we have a
Yeah,
whole
you
litany
saved,
of things.
you saved up, it took you a few years to save it up, but
It did.
you had I don't know if it was 400, 290, I can't remember the number, but it was between 250 and 400 that you had specifically allocated and saved up for the garage. Correct?
It is, yes.
If we could get that number, I would propose that we transfer that amount only to the 301 because of the projects that we're thinking about doing in the 301. We're gonna need it, I know we're gonna need it,
Absolutely.
because we're not gonna have enough with the things that we wanted to do. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So Kathy.
The
can-
garage, you asked me to look this up,
Oh.
I have it now. The garage was paid entirely out of 301 and 676.
But I guess I would ask Nino to look back if you could give us a
I think it was like
number.
150,000, John.
Yeah.
I'll look at my notes.
Pretty sure it wasn't, but if you can tell Kathy what that was, we'll make that one transfer and then
Thank you.
that'll help us out, I think, from our projects that we want to do, or designate.
Now you have,
I know how much, we have a lot of money in the 301, but
yeah, that's.
the number of
only-
projects we have in the 301 exceed the amount of money we have in the 301.
Well, you also have money coming in every year there too.
I know, but the big things that we, I mean, you were talking about the pool, that's like $2 million, I mean, so.
Well, anywhere from 1 million at the
Maybe
low
your
end.
pool.
Well, the pool, but then you have the pool house, you gotta remember, then you got operating funds to operate the pool every year.
That wouldn't be 301, but.
That's another
I know, but I'm just
discussion.
saying, it's an ongoing drain, no pun intended. So.
Wow, you're on a roll.
But is everybody okay with that concept? If we get the number, we'll talk about the next meeting about doing a transfer from,
Well, are we gonna pass the carry forward or something?
yeah, this is something different. This is,
You,
Okay.
you
That's
started
not
the year with
very well.
$4.4
Yeah,
million
it's not
in the 301
general
fund.
fund.
Oh,
that includes the bond issue of 1.2?
Right. Well, what wasn't spent already on the garage.
Right. All right, those are my only questions, so.
On the whole carry forward or on those funds?
On those funds, but I'll let other people talk about the other issues they have. Mark?
Well, I mean, you're on this topic, I mean, I just had a couple of questions, like, for public building maintenance, utilities and communications, we have, carry forward of, or you're requesting 87,000. And I'm just trying to, with 132 budgeted for this year, I mean, do you truly need that 87,000, or can we slice that down a little bit? On 52212?
Right. Going forward, I mean, you can look at the history of what was spent, and then within utilities and communications. What we're trying to do is replace lights, LEDs where we can. We just had,
Oh,
this
now we're into
recent-
LEDs, huh?
Well, we actually have been, like over at PD, we had 9 lights replaced.
LED?
What we wanna do is, when a ballast goes bad, rather than replace the ballast, replace bulbs, we're exchanging fixtures, and the fixture is about $300.
Okay.
We have numerous fixtures in City Hall and PD that we're going to work on, so,
Well, and just looking at that line item, 2009 was our highest year of 122 and some change. And we have budgeted out 140, 144, 2 out to 2017, so.
yeah, and to be honest with you, that should come down because we're seeing a reduction. I know Keith had sent the mayor an email, he thought we didn't budget enough, but actually, when you asked Keith what was going on, but that we're seeing a reduction in electrical costs because of the things we're doing, so it should go down
Like,
further.
You know, and I look through all these, and I guess my point is that, you know, we've told department heads that, you know, if they're frugal, they can, you know, keep their funds, but there, in some areas, you know, I think we could be over budgeting. So the way I look at it is that, I mean, I'm willing to pass what we have in front of us, but just so the department heads know that when it comes budget time, you know, I might bring some of this out, but,
No, it's fine, Mark.
I have some concerns with them, maybe we can, you know, look into the future, maybe thin out some areas that, some of that carry forward will make up,
And you can.
which we've
'cause
done in the past, too.
You're talking with Dawn and the mayor with the phone system that's being installed, and I think it was just delivered today, we should see, I don't wanna say significant, we don't know at this point, but we're gonna see reductions with regard to utilities and communications, so electric and phone both.
Well, I would agree. I think the
That's
two
the
that
answer.
stick out the most that I think we can look at during budgeting would be the court and the clerk of court. Would be, they seem to be doing a fine job over there saving money, but that may give an indication that maybe we're budgeting a little too much, so we can have a better picture of the money available in future years. Because if they have money available each year for the current carry forward available, the court's 410,000 and the clerk is 236,000. I mean, that's a pretty good chunk of their budget, at least over 20% in each one, so. We have to look at that and say, why are we 20% over budgeting 20% too much? That would give us a picture in the future. If we do that every year, it's just gonna keep going up.
I think part of it is too, Mark, if you look at a variety of the numbers, like 3322 there, it averages 26, 30 to 50,000. And even with the carry forward, we're at 18, and then the out years we're at 15. So I think some of those numbers are inflated a little bit to then be able to transfer to cover some of those other deficiencies and stay within a reasonable number.
And I recall during the budget process, we did see some of those areas where we thinned out future years because we knew we'd pull from some of that carry forward, so
Yes,
that's.
sir.
I do have a question. You know, you brought up the phones. I don't know who the right person is to answer this, but are the phones going to be charged to individual departments, or is that going to be coming out of the general fund? As far as allocating, you know, this department gets 2 phones, this department gets 6 phones? Is that?
Yeah, they've always gone to departments, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Per department.
Per department? Okay. Thank you.
That's the way it's always been. This time, though, instead of the monthly charge for every single phone is coming down from what it had been. So that's where we'll see the savings, and
Okay.
that's just multiplied across with the number of phones.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Now, just so everybody understands the big picture item, there were current carry forward available was $14 million. Of that, $6 million, one was old, and the rest of it was new, and they're only requesting out of that $14 million, $9 million to be reappropriated. So it was cut by, you know, $5 million, which is a lot. Our budget's $36 million. So. And then, of course, the income tax accounts, I think, is on the next. I think, well, these are the general fund accounts. Just out of the general fund accounts, there was 2.6 million available. Another about $1 million was new, and so they were only requesting 1.9 million to be reappropriated. So there's a cut there also, which will definitely help us in the balances for future years to make a determination of how far out we're going to make sure that the city is still quote-unquote in the black, and what kind of services can be provided with the money available. It looks, from what we see here, in my mind, the administration is doing a good job as far as saving money. Projects are getting done, some new projects are occurring, and we're still looking good for 5 years. 5 years out. With some modifications, hopefully we can stretch that a little further during the budget process, which I think we should look at a few of these accounts in the budget process to make sure as far as how we are budgeting, if that's, are we budgeting too much? What can we do based upon the history of the carry forward? Is it really being a savings in the department, or are we just budgeting too much for the department? So that would be the question.
I agree. 20% can be a bit much. And I want to thank all the department heads who responded to my emails for that. It's obvious that everybody has a good plan on what they want to do with the money, so I don't have any additional questions on that.
And I think the chief, as far as his carry forward appropriation proposal, Chief of Police, Chief Baraducci gave us an idea of what he would do with his carry forward. And I don't know if anybody had questions regarding that. Of course, it goes right back into his account, but since it's mainly income tax, I think it's 45% you get. So, does anybody have any questions? I know we just received this, but you know, he has some ideas that what he would like to do with some of his money that was saved. I think he mentioned to me there was $800,000 under revenue. Of course, revenue was up a little bit, so he did get a little bit of benefit from that. He has $407,000 here that he'd like to use for different projects that he has proposed. So as long as income tax keeps going up, things will look good. I mean, that helps everybody out. And the biggest benefactor of that, of course, would be the police department, because they got 45% of any increase in income tax that we realize. So, any other comments, questions? Department heads, you have anything for us? Nobody wants any more money out there, that's great. All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve the carry forward request as submitted.
So moved. Second.
Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, guys, thanks for all your hard work.
I think you skipped the request for council action.
Oh, we did carry forward first, I was gonna go into finance meeting.
That's the first item on it.
Oh, sorry.
Just so you know.
Okay, finance committee meeting portion starts. We have assignment for request for council action. We have several for the finance committee. We have 1331, amending salaries and benefits code section 13301, service department. 1332, budget amendments. 1333, expenditure over $15,000, street department. 1334, waiver of special assessments for weeds. 1335, potential VABs, redemption, refinancing. 1336, repealing ordinance 197-12 and ordinance 190-12. 1337, contract with T&M Associates, US EPA Brownfield Grant. 1338, MCRC part-time pay policy amendment 3102E. 1339, amendment with Lewis Land Professionals Historic District waterline replacement. 1340, 406 South Broadway property, Medina Creative Housing. And 1341, advance for general fund to grants fund. 13026, fire department restructure. We spoke about this last meeting a little bit. Everybody had an opportunity to either ask questions or think about it more. And I don't know if the chief has anything else to add, but does anybody have any questions regarding the restructure that was proposed, that we spoke about briefly last meeting?
Chief, question, the hierarchy, if you will, there with this new operations captain, it has the authority over even though it's a part-time, but as first assistant chief.
Correct.
I'm trying to decipher, I mean, it's still considered one of our chiefs of the fire department, even though he is part-time. Why?
They're trying to solve the problem of having part-timers supervising full-time employees. It just doesn't work. And also that position was kind of pigeonholed. So this will give the assistant chief and then 3 captains an opportunity to test up if they want. So either they test up or, he's getting passed over basically. I will apologize. This has been going on for so long to council. it's been over a year, I've been working with administration and the law department to get this through, and I never even thought when civil service approved it, we got it up to you guys, that, you know, you had about 2 days to look at it last time, so I apologize for that.
Well, I think there's been discussion too with the, through the law director, Mr. Huber, and Walter and Haverfield, about the issues involved with the part-time being involved and supervisory control. And I understand that that's what is occurring and you need a separate position, but I believe that, just to get my mind straight, the assistant chief currently, how's that gonna work then with the assistant chief there in a new position as far as control is concerned? Wouldn't the assistant now watch over the part-time, or is it odd hours, or how does that, I just wanna get my mind around how that's really gonna work
Well,
in practice.
actually, all the part-timers with this new ops captain are gonna be subordinate to that position.
Okay.
We went round and round to come up with a name for it, just for that fact that it confuses them. We really don't have, you know, other titles like some of the military do for theirs, but, their thought this was the cleanest way to set it up now, knowing that the first assistant chief's not gonna be a long-term position, whether it's, you know, 1 year, 10 years, I don't know yet, but that'll get resolved. It's kind of like baby steps to untangle this kind of mess that we're in with this.
Now, the current position that's there, when that retires, my understanding is that's going to, we'll pass a resolution to abolish that position?
Correct.
At that time?
Right.
And you speak of the first assistant?
Right.
Okay.
Just operationally, that it's changed so much in the last, you know, 5, 6 years that, you know, it just doesn't, the hierarchy doesn't really work that well anymore. There's the same hierarchy they've had for about 25 years when it was all volunteer, and you slowly went adding on, and that's the.
So then, I guess, since we can't do it prospectively, just whenever that occurs, if you would let us know.
Right.
Because then we'd have to pass a
Exactly.
resolution to, you know.
And they said they would
change-
work on a legislation for
Right.
us when the time comes.
Work on the legislation for that.
One other question about the pay grade for this. I know in other departments, people have taken on additional responsibility, and, you know, I myself feel more comfortable if we kept the operations captain position at the pay grade 10 AF, similar to what the old fire educator inspector was at, instead of, you know, increasing that slot. So, I mean, that's personally how I feel about it.
Just in fire departments in general, we're at the very rock bottom, and then you take a 3 or 4 county area, we're rock bottom.
Mhm.
And I'll be honest, I don't think anyone will take the position if it doesn't get bumped up a little bit. And that position's within a few $100s of what the captains, part-time captains are making now. You multiply out by 2,080, and it's real close. That's kind of why we use that number. Kind of keeps them in the same pay scale where they're at.
But it's a full-time position with benefits.
Correct.
Where the part-time, it's part-time and no benefit, or minimum.
I believe it's only, it's an increase from the public educators, the ops captain, that rank is $4,300 a year. And that keeps it in the chief, the fire marshal, this position. It keeps it, we're several grand between each position going down. So it's kind of the same hierarchy like PD would have also.
And it's most likely to be.
It's about a 10% difference. 'cause
Most
each-
likely, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, each grade is 5%, so if you went from 10A to 11A, that's 5, 10A to 12A is another 5, so 10% over the course of 6 or 7 steps is where we're at. And it's more responsibility and more liability in this position than it was in the fire educator and inspector position. So that's why we felt the pay was commensurate with the duties. I'm sorry.
And when the position's filled, it'll go through civil service, I would imagine.
Right.
And looking at the position, do current, either part-time get preference, I guess, is there?
Well, it has to go to the rank below, which would be the first assistant chief. One person not competitive, which opens it up, so it'd be him and the 3 captains.
Okay.
If we don't get 2 out of that, it gets opened up to the lieutenants and then down to the firefighters, but it stays in-house.
I got you.
And the emergency clause, I know you've been waiting a while for this.
Yeah, that's and again, I go either way. If it's an issue, I can wait at this point, because it's gonna have to go through civil service yet for the testing and part and that, so.
So you really don't need it then, or?
Well, no, it's been pending since Andres left in October of 2011.
I
So
understand.
they're trying to carry on all these duties, but if you guys approve it even tonight with the emergency clause, we're 2.5, 3 months out by the time we go through all the testing, the interviews, make a selection. You know, it's still a process, so it's not like if you say, okay, we can hire tomorrow, we gotta go through all that, and it just delays starting that. Our preference would be with the emergency clause, if you guys feel strongly against it, then we'll do what we need to do for another 30 days, but that's the reason for asking for it.
How does everybody feel about that?
I'm okay with the emergency clause.
So you're saying you can't even start the testing process?
Correct.
And
We
civil
don't
service,
have the
give us 2
position,
weeks head start on it.
we don't have the position created until this formalizes it.
and civil service, when we had the original meeting, they said they would not talk the testing side until it's approved and in ordinance form from you guys. So that would push it.
When's the
out.
next civil service meeting that they can make that decision?
No, they already did. They already did to get it to you.
Yeah, they're fine now, and I happen to be at that civil service committee meeting, so I know they thoroughly reviewed this as well as Craig and Todd Hunt, so it's been a long time coming.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve with the emergency clause.
Second with the emergency clause.
Any further discussion? All in favor with the emergency clause?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. All right, thank you. Next item is 1331, amending 13301 of the Salaries and Benefits Code, Association memberships. Mr. Pacolo.
Thank you, Mr. Coyne. Bill McGargy, Superintendent Water, came with a vehicle quote. I understood it was to be state bid. The Mayor asked about other quotes, and he doesn't miss much. But with that, look into the CUE. We're not a member of the Community University Education Purchasing Association. This is through the University of Akron. We were a member back in '02, and we let it expire. It's an opportunity, it's another tool to purchase products, items, vehicles, salt, secured a decent price for the vehicle, and it is through the CUE program, which is a procurement process, versus the state bid. So that's why, for the $200, it's well worth membership.
What was the dollar difference between the state bid and this bid?
The vehicle that they're looking at is a Ford Transit, wasn't even on the state bid. It's so new out. Many entities are purchasing it, and it's not on the state bid at this point, as it wasn't not last year when Jared purchased one, and it's not this year, so.
Okay. I know Jared's very happy with his,
Yes.
the utility that service that gives him, yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 1332, budget amendments, we have 4,700 for the police department, $3,800.
Chief asked me to speak to this. They're paying for training for a police special, and they'd originally put it through to pay it out of the police account, but then the mayor pointed out it's the employee isn't a police officer, it's special, so it's more appropriate to charge here, but transfer has to come to finance committee.
Questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Finance, a 210304, US EPA Brownfield Grant, referencing RCA 13037.
This ties in with the next two items on the agenda. We in finance put this request in because we needed, this is the mechanics that we need to do this. Probably should discuss it with, if you want to discuss the whole three together and
Yeah,
then
it's
all
just-
three of them, if
yeah.
you want to talk about the Brownfield grant.
Where this came from is, council this past fall authorized the city to rebid our brownfield contract. We were in a contract with Arcadis. Two of their principals had left the company, so we rebid it last fall. At that time, the council request was to issue the RFQ and award a contract. However, it did not specify a max dollar amount within that council authorization. We did award the contract to Keenan Associates, and they are currently under contract. However, we did not specify a dollar amount at that time. So that this request is to specify that max dollar amount to allow finance to prepare for the payment of invoices. I think we had requested a max appropriation of $860,000. 100% of those dollars are reimbursed by the US EPA. They pay us throughout the grant cycle.
Can you tell us again how that $860,000 is going to be used?
So we'll be doing phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessments for properties to hopefully position them for redevelopment. Ones that do have some contamination Farmers Exchange, the Chamber, the former Henry Furnace site, the Immacare site, Chippewa Lake, and I imagine we'll probably take on a couple more properties as well over the next year.
From a business development or economic development standpoint, this helps, because if we didn't do it, if we didn't have the grant to do it, the business owners would have to do it on their own. So it really helps them by providing this funding source for them.
Any questions on that one?
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. A related one is 13037, the contract with T&M Associates US EPA Brownfield Grant. He just explained that. Any other questions or comments on that? Has emergency clauses been requested on this one? Is that just because of the timing?
Yes, since they are already incurring costs, we have invoice to pay.
Move to approve with the emergency clause?
Second with the emergency clause?
Any further discussion? All in favor with the emergency clause?
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. And finally, the 13041, advance request US EPA Brownfield Grant. Any questions? There's no emergency clause on this one.
Move to approve?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign, motion carries. 13033, expenditure over $15,000 for the street department. Nino?
Thanks, Mr. Quinn. This is for the plowing equipment. As you see, cutting edges, bolts. We have 11-foot plows with a cutting edge, and we have a highway punch, which is 13 nuts and bolts for every time there's a cutting edge exchanged. So you can see the breakout and what the related costs are. Gary shopped this. He does well. Winter equipment has served the city well this year and last year as well, so we prefer to buy from them.
Move to approve?
Second.
Any further questions?
You know, where's this company out of?
They're out of, I don't want to say Mount Gilead, in that area.
Ohio?
Yes. Yeah, Fastenal does not have this type of grade bolt.
Any further questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next one is 13034, waiver of special assessments for weeds.
We assessed the property over on Friendship Street prior to acquiring it for cutting weeds there. If we go through with collecting this, the county will collect it from us, for us, and charge us a fee for the convenience. So if we waive it, we avoid the fee, and since the money comes back to us anyway, it makes more sense to avoid the fee.
Move to approve?
Second.
Any further questions on waiving our own fee? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 13035, potential BABs, redemption and refinancing. Keith?
I sent you an email on this, and then later today I sent you, so everybody has the iPad should have this chart. It kind of demonstrates what we're looking. I can give you some.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's motion.
No.
Give that pass back. Give me a couple back. He's got it on the iPad.
Like those old wooden posts, the big round wooden signs at the intersection. Who is that?
Okay, these are nice colored lines, what do they mean?
What they mean, the blue line is the interest rate, the coupon we're paying on the Build America bonds, on the taxable bonds that we issued under the Build America bonds program. The red line is what we will pay, assuming that the federal government pays the 35% reimbursement that they agreed to pay at the time we issued those, which is now in some dispute. And the green line is the rate that we could get at our credit rating as a municipal issuer on tax-exempt bonds today. The reason it's lower than the rate that we are paying on the ones we issued a few years ago is two things. First of all, because we've moved forward a few years, as you can see, rates generally get higher as you move out. So the 2013 bonds that we issued 3 years ago were at that time were 3-year maturities. Now they're current, so it's just generally going to be lower. And then the market interest rates have dropped. I tried to explain this in the email. I know it's a complex issue. If the feds decide not to reimburse all of this 35%, then we have a clause in the bonds that allows us to refinance them on 30 days notice. What I talked to the city auditor down in Columbus about what they've done with this. They've gone to their council. They have a lot more on the line. They have about $500 million worth of these. So they had their bond counsel draw it up already. They've got the authority, so if the feds don't reimburse it, they're ready to go. They've got the authorization and they can go ahead. That's what I'm bringing to you, is do we want to go that direction? This may not go anywhere, because if the sequester negotiations are solved and they do pay the full reimbursement, we won't have the opportunity to refinance, but we'll continue to get the reimbursement. If the feds don't make the reimbursement, per this clause we have in the bonds, we have the ability to refinance them and walk away from the feds. I turned in the paperwork on Friday to the IRS for the reimbursement. I think it's I quoted the numbers, $124,000 that they owe us June 1st, that they may or may not pay us because they're the feds and they can do that. I don't know how else to.
So if they, this is requested the reimbursement, and don't, I'm trying to look what the downside is. So they don't pay us, so we're able to refinance, we save money. If they pay us, then we get paid.
Well,
I mean, why wouldn't we want to do this?
I talked to bond counsel about that. The big question is gonna be if we're able to do it, and I kind of explained there that the question on this clause says we can do it if the Department of Treasury ceases to make the reimbursement or announces their intention. Our attorney, bond counsel, does not think that they're going to announce their intention anytime before they absolutely have to, so that's probably not gonna happen until the last minute. Where it gets confusing is the feds, and what I called it in email, the feds play this kind of budget chicken game all the time, where they're back and forth in the negotiations. I don't know what happens if they don't make the payment on June 1st, because Congress and the President still haven't solved the sequester.
But they have to make their payment by June 1st.
They're the feds, they don't have to do anything.
I know, but our document says that if we don't get paid by June 1st, then.
Yeah, but if they don't, if they decide they're not gonna pay it, and we say, okay, we're gonna refinance these bonds, we issue the notice that we're gonna call, we start going forwards, we're gonna start spending money at that point. Okay, we're gonna have to get Moody's in here to do a rating, we're gonna have to pay for printing, we're gonna have to pay. Now, if all of a sudden they solve this, so we start doing all that, and then we're ready to go to market on June 30th, and all of a sudden the feds come in and solve this budget sequester question on June 28th or 29th, and they say, okay, we're gonna pay you.
Too late, isn't it?
That's an open question. I mean, that's a question for the attorneys to figure out, because there's nothing in the clause that says that it can be terminated, but you could certainly argue it either way.
How much
I mean,
is their potential savings, I guess? What's the potential savings if we,
The potential savings versus the net, assuming that they end up paying the 35% anyway, is probably 700, 800,000, maybe a little more. The potential savings versus the gross, if they completely stop making the reimbursement at all, the potential savings is considerably larger. I don't think it's gonna happen. I mean, I think they're gonna pay part of it. Ultimately, I think they're probably gonna pay all of it. We just might have a window where we have an opportunity to refinance it and get a better deal while they're short.
and how much money are we talking out of pocket that would incur during that window?
Well, bond counsel and our underwriter I talked to last week, and I think both of them would be willing to do this it would be on a if we issue basis. So we wouldn't have any fees racked up with those two entities. As we get closer to it, we will start having some fees. I mean, there's filing fees with OMAC, you're gonna have to pay for some things. I mean, I can get you more of a total. We're working through this right now, so I don't know what the total of that is gonna be, and it would depend on how close we got before we were told we had to stop. And then the other question is this outstanding legal question. If bond counsel feels that once they fail the reimbursement, there's no going back, then that really becomes a moot point, because if they don't make the reimbursement on June 1st, we can start going, and we're not gonna have to walk it back. You understand what I
So
mean?
why don't we
Because
wait till
if
June
they're-
1st? Is that what?
Well, we're gonna have to wait till June 1st, but like with Columbus, I mean, they already passed this, and the reason was because the window might be fairly short. If they don't have this solved by June 1st, we don't get the reimbursement on June 1st, okay, then according to the clause, we're able to redeem these bonds starting June 1st. If they solve that in Congress on June 3rd, depending on how you read that clause, we might no longer have the authority to do this refinancing on June 4th. And that's where, now, we wouldn't have any costs in writing up the ordinance if counsel and the underwriter are gonna do it on a contingent basis if there's an issue done. So then that's really a non-issue, but I'd have to go to them and have them do all that, which are you okay, first of all, last time we bid council an underwriter, it was just last year, so are we okay with using them again, or do we wanna go through that
Well, I
process
guess my
again?
question is, if it's June 1st and we have that window and we tee it up, couldn't they still say, well, we're not gonna let you pay off the bonds? They could refuse.
Who?
I don't know, you're saying it's federal government deal.
Well,
there.
but the feds are for the reimbursement. The people who would not want the bonds to be reimbursed would be the bond holders,
right.
because they're selling above par right now. When interest rates go down, the price of the bonds goes up. So if you're holding a $5,000 bond from this issue, it's now worth $5,050. That's not a big deal. If you're holding $1 million worth of them, it becomes a bigger deal. They're the people who would want to say, you can't do this.
Right.
Okay, and that, I mean, that would be the question. If that window's open for 4 days, do we want to have the ordinances approved, everything ready to go, and okay, they don't make the reimbursement, we sign the papers and start going with it? I don't know what happens, and bond counsel's working that out. I don't have all those answers right now. I'm giving you what I have, what's going on with this. I gave you the clause. I can't explain it any better than that, because that's gonna be, the lawyers are gonna figure that out.
So we're certain.
I'm a lawyer, I haven't figured anything out.
So we're certain that if the sequester goes through, then these will be affected.
It depends on what agreement they come up with. I mean, the administration is saying they will
But
not
I mean, you're
pay-
tying all this to the sequester.
Because it's tied up in that negotiation. The administration is saying they're not gonna be able to pay all of these reimbursements if the sequester goes into effect. Now, I don't think that constitutes an announcement of intent to cease making the full reimbursement. Because per the clause that allows us to redeem, it says they either have to not make the full reimbursement or make an announcement. The Department of Treasury has to make an announcement of an intent not to make the full reimbursement. I mean, the clock is in a way ticking on that now, because Friday I turned in the paperwork for the reimbursement from the feds. In theory, they could send us a letter back, as soon as they get that and say, hey, you're not getting this. That, I think, would constitute an announcement. I don't think that's gonna happen, neither does bond counsel. They think they're gonna wait till the last possible minute, because they don't know what Congress is gonna do and what the president's gonna do in this negotiation. So the Department of Treasury is probably gonna wait until pretty much the last possible minute, and then all of a sudden on June 1st, we're not gonna get it.
Well, in any event, there's gonna be a lawsuit by the bondholders.
Yeah, there's gonna be some penalty.
I mean, because the bondholders aren't gonna let this happen.
That is
they're gonna
certainly
sue.
a potential, and I think that is certainly a potential that our
So if we
bond
try to
counsel-
refinance it, the bondholders sue, they're gonna stop it, we're not gonna be able to refinance. By the time they figure it out, the interest rates will probably go up. But I guess you need to get more information. I mean, 800,000 is a lot of money. If we could do it, why wouldn't we? I think it might be irresponsible of us not to at least try to see what the cost would be to try to do that. And we have to make a determination of how much are we willing to spend to take that chance to save 800,000. Because it's all taxpayers' money we're talking about.
Now, I mentioned in the email, the city auditor for Columbus said that the last he heard from Congress was they were talking about a deal where they were gonna pay 25% instead of 35%.
But I
If-
think that leads to my next.
If they were to do that, we would have to have Amanda come in and address this question, but I don't think the bondholders would have much of a case at that point, because they clearly aren't making the reimbursement.
Right.
Where I think we get in trouble is if the door gets closed by a deal after 6 days. I think the bondholders can look at that and say, hey, wait a minute, you're getting your reimbursement, you can't do this.
Even though I didn't get it in time you said you were gonna get it.
Right. And I don't know, I mean, that's a legal question for the attorneys.
Well, I
can tell
always
you what the
thought that
question
usually
is,
if you
I
have a
can't tell
deadline,
what
you
the
have to
answer's
follow
gonna
it, otherwise.
That's why there's a deadline.
Unless you're the
That's why there's a deadline.
Don't follow the deadline, there's a penalty.
Well, when will we have a better feeling of what the cost would be and the timing? When's our deadline, like, we have to make a decision to tee it up? I mean, is it May? Do we need a month? Do we need 2 months?
The only point where you're gonna have a deadline is if we get that notice or the lack of a reimbursement. Now, we said we're probably not gonna get a notice until the last minute, so it's probably gonna be June 1st, okay? The deadline is whenever the federal government closes that window. I mean, I can't give you a
Well, even if they
day.
close the window, we can still go forward. I mean, because we would argue, you don't have the right to close the window.
Well, the question there is, and again, we'd have to bring the
Right.
bond counsel in. I don't know that we could issue a call after they close the window. I think if we issued the call before they close the window,
Well, I guess
probably
the
be
question,
okay.
well,
But I don't think, but that's where your deadline comes in. I think if, you know, if they don't pay it on June 1st, but then they come back and pay it on June 10th, I don't think we can go out on June 15th and say, well, they were late, we're gonna refinance this. I don't think that's gonna fly.
I don't know why.
That's
it
not my
wouldn't.
decision
Right,
ultimately,
right.
but I'm just telling you, I don't think it's gonna fly.
Well, I think that you would, you know, a good case, but I guess it's all a question, will be in litigation. Huber would be staying up late nights and trying to figure this out. And-
I think, the other thing on that is, and I mean, I can talk to Mr. Dorian down in Columbus again, the other thing on that is, they have $500 million on the line here, it's a lot more money. We can let them fight the case. The problem there is, if the window gets closed, they're gonna be the only ones that are gonna get it. You understand what I mean?
Right.
And so, they'll be the ones that'll have to pay the legal fees, which make more sense anyway, because they get a lot more money on the line. But if we're waiting to find out from them, and, you know, we're not gonna find out in, that case is not gonna be solved in 3 weeks.
Right.
I mean, you understand what I mean? That's not gonna be a short thing.
So the question is, who's gonna have the most pressure on to make the decision? Are the bondholders strong enough to make the Fed, Congress, bring it back in? Okay. So,
We need to know how much it will cost to potentially save $800,000,
right,
I guess.
so if you could try to narrow it down, if it costs 5,000, if it costs 10,000, there may be a number where we'll say, geez, that's too much, we don't wanna take that risk.
Should we proceed with the things that don't have a cost attached to them?
Why not?
With our current bond counsel and underwriter?
Doesn't cost us, I mean, why not?
Okay.
Yeah, we could do that.
I will,
But there's gonna be a point in time where they're gonna feel, well, how much am I gonna be spending
Yeah,
my time?
exactly.
So they'll make a decision for us in a certain regard. But, bring us back that information, proceed to the non-cost items, and we have to make a determination if it gets close enough that if we're gonna save 800,000, was it worth to us to save 800,000?
And these non-cost items, whatever we're doing, it's not gonna affect the city negatively on the market or anything?
well, I asked Mr. Dorian the same question, if he thought that there was gonna be pushback from bondholders, and Mr. Dorian made a good point. Look, this is a clause that's in the bonds. It's not like we're, you know, it's not like we're doing something that we're not supposed to do. The bonds say right in them, when we sold them, we said, if the feds don't make the reimbursement, we protected ourselves with this. If the feds don't make the reimbursement, we have the right to back out of this deal and refinance. And the bondholders bought them subject to that clause. He doesn't feel, you know, his specific, he said, I work for the taxpayers of the city of Columbus, not for the bondholders. I mean, I, feel the same way. I think we work for the taxpayers of the city of Medina. If it costs the bondholders, because the $800,000 comes from the bondholders. We're saving it for the taxpayers and we're taking it from the bondholders. We work for the taxpayers. It's our job to do that. I mean, that was Mr. Dorian's point. I mean, I think he was right. I was a little worried about that, and that's why I asked him, and he didn't feel like it was gonna be an issue. It was subject to that. We're following that clause.
Now, that clause in the bond, when they purchased it, was that part of the federal legislation, or was that part of
No, that was part
our
of,
negotiations?
that was part of our issue, and actually, not all the BABs that are out there have that, because there are a lot of cities that have BABs out there that don't have this clause to protect themselves, that will not be able to refinance them if the feds don't make the reimbursement. It was in there in ours to protect us against this possibility. I talked about it with the underwriter when we did our issue, and I actually thought it would be in the fall, not the spring, because the federal budget comes up in the fall, and I thought, well, if they're late getting their budget done, we don't get this money in November, where are we gonna be? And we talked about it, and that this clause is in there to protect us from that. It came up in the spring instead of the fall, what can I say? But it did come up. It's not part of the federal legislation, though. Each of these bond issues can be worded a different way.
Everybody all right with that? All right, thanks, Keith.
Thank you.
Next item is 13-036, repealing ordinance 19712 and ordinance 19012. Put your hand up.
These two ordinances relate to the zoning code update approved by council at the end of the year. One ordinance is for the zoning code text and map, the other one is for the fee schedule. The request to repeal it is related to the public notice procedure that occurred. There are two code references that talk about notice of zoning changes to property owners. I was referring to the code references that we have for the Ohio Revised Code that reference if you're affecting more than 10 properties, you do your public notice through the general newspaper. We had a public hearing through council. We also did notices through our planning commission meetings. Mr. Huber had flagged, though, that that was an inappropriate process. There was also a code reference in our zoning code that talks about giving a written notice to each impacted property owner. So we're asking the request to a fair bit of code change. For example, we merged our C3 and C4 commercial districts. We also merged our R2 and R3 residential districts. In those circumstances, those codes were very similar. So we merged those zoning districts, but those property owners are impacted, even if it's a minor standpoint, they are changing their zoning districts. So that's an example of some of the code changes. So the request would be to repeal it and then let us go through a per parcel notification and come back to you probably within 60 days or so.
Questions?
If we repeal this, we revert to the previous code?
Yep.
Yes. The request to do so, at this meeting will allow us to keep things moving for planning commission meetings, not have any cases kind of sit with one camp in two different codes.
Move to approve with the emergency clause.
Second with the emergency clause?
Any further comments? All in favor with the emergency clause?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 1238, MCRC part-time pay policy amendment. Mr. Wright?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is just a request to clean up some of the wording in our current policy for the part-time pay rate increase policy. We currently have a 30-day policy for merit increases to become in effect, and we want to remove this and then follow the city policy, and then want some of the process for evaluation removed also.
Well, the only question I had, there was a reason we put it in here. Now we're taking it out.
Absolutely. Maureen suggested to, what it is we have a pool manager stepping up from a position that she's already currently in for the rec center. Maureen felt it best to civil service to do it as a merit increase instead of having the person resign and then rehired under the new current manager position. And in that process, it would only allow her to increase in that after that 30 days. Beginning of March, our pool aquatics manager is on leave for a month, and this pool manager will be filling that position at the previous head lifeguard rate. We don't have a policy in place as the union does for a 7% increase or anything like that for covering a position like this. So we'd really like her to at least be at her current pay when she does the covering for that position, which is why we requested emergency.
Well, is by changing this, we're changing it for a particular reason, but does it affect all the other reasons why we have it in place?
So altogether, we actually introduced the 30-day policy a while back just to help alleviate if we turned in, say, 40 people for merit increases at one time to make it easier for Darn payroll. We have yet to do that. I think the most we've ever turned in at one time is 10 in the past 3 years at a time. So, it's a fairly easy process for them.
Questions? Everybody understand that?
Move to approve with the emergency clause.
Second with the emergency clause?
Any further discussion? All in favor with the emergency clause?
Aye.
Next item is 1339, agreement with Lewis Lane Professionals, Historic District Water Line Replacement Project. Mr. Pat.
Thank you. Mark referenced our water utilities meeting the other day. This was one of the projects on there for this year. It's a replacement of many of the water lines around the square area. We kind of put this as a priority because we'd like to try and do it in conjunction with ODOT's project to resurface Route 18 and 57 this year. We'll get this done in advance of that project and then come through and resurface behind us. We acquired proposals from 4 different firms. Lewis Land Professional was the expensive and recommending that we use those.
Questions?
Move to approve with the emergency clause.
Second with the emergency clause?
Any further comments? All in favor with the emergency clause?
Aye.
All right, the last item is 1413040, Medina Creative Housing and 406 South Broadway property. Mayor, you have this one?
Yes, sir. The Medina Creative Housing is applying for a grant to rebuild the barn at 406 South Broadway and dismantle and rebuild the barn and do modifications to the house for some of the services that we've talked about in establishing a trail end, from snacks to gift shop to whatever. It provides housing for their residents as well as uses the house and the trail on for purposes that we as a city think is a good idea. So we've had several discussions on the side with Medina Creative Housing. The CDC has also worked with Creative Housing to help with suggestions, recommendations, design of what they hope to do down there. And we just wanted to bring it publicly to council and make sure that there's no objections or reservations in proceeding with them. First applying for the grant, we would still come back to council if and when they're successful with the grant and presenting either an agreement or a lease option on the property once we get to that point.
How does this currently affect our grant that we have in place regarding using those funds to dismantle the barn or demolish it, or, I mean, do we lose the opportunity to use those monies to do it?
No.
How long does it take to get the new grant? I mean, when does our time period run out, I guess? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Our grant with the state's gonna be done by the time this new grant, even the approval takes place.
So if we don't take advantage of the grant we currently have to use those funds, and we say, Medina Crown, you go get a grant, they don't get the grant, what happens then? What do? We lose the money, and we're faced with rebuilding the barn or doing it ourselves with our own money? Or do we, I guess the question is, we have money available now to do something with.
To dismantle the barn.
Right. If we don't use that money to
And do
dismantle
the
the
parking lot.
If we don't use that money.
We're gonna use that money,
All of it.
well, as best we can.
I'm just saying, we have a question with the barn on the table. If we don't use that money for the barn and we rely on them getting the grant, they don't get the grant, what do? Do we have to come back to council and say, we have to do something with the barn, do you guys have to pay for it now, meaning the city?
No, the state grant is going to pay to dismantle the barn.
If they don't get the
So that
grant?
it comes down.
What if they don't?
Not their
Barn's coming down
Our
regardless.
grant.
Okay.
Our grant is gonna
I
pay to
got you.
tear down the barn
I got
and
you.
to do the parking lot.
I got you.
If they're successful with their grant, they're going to rebuild the barn and
okay.
rehab the house. Now, if they don't get that grant, then they're gonna search out other grants.
Gotcha.
If we get impatient and council wants to expend dollars to rebuild the barn, then we have that option
Gotcha.
as well.
But the barn comes down regardless.
I got you.
Correct.
And did the issue get resolved for the demolishing versus?
Yes, they're okay with dismantling.
Starts with a D, it's all
Yes,
good.
Greg?
That's what I thought.
Yes.
All right.
Because that was a question. Sometimes these little fine points can get very tricky with grant dollars, but as long as it's coming down, they're okay with that.
Any other comments?
So I guess you were right.
What?
Well, if he's there one day and not there the next day, what's the difference
There's no
between
difference.
dismantle and demolish?
All starts with a D, it's all about the D.
It is.
Right. We have to do right now.
Councilman Mayor, I know Diane Haggerty from Backyard Living was planning to attend. I just stepped out to check her schedule, and she was running late and was planning to be here about 6:15, 6:20, if council needed anything or had any questions.
Well, I think it's a great opportunity to collaborate with an organization that can really use that property and aid the city and aid their organization at the same time.
Agreed.
So why not?
The other thing I think it does too, though, I think Matt Lederholt from Main Street, we talked about, he said, it's not just creative housing, but they're really bringing business. You know, they'll be putting 3 separate businesses on that property, which is also beneficial to the downtown. And there's really 2 nonprofits, because as the mayor said, the Community Design Committee also put a letter in with that, with her request for her grant, so the CDC can work with them on the design and the outcome of the restoration of the house, as well as the reconstruction of the barn. So it is a really very neat outcome.
Yep.
But Bill, when you say bring business, this is nonprofit that is providing the service. I mean, I think it's a great opportunity.
Well, I mean, business in the sense that people, you can go there and get lunch, if this works out, you can go and get lunch, or you can go rent a bike, or you can go to the gift shop or be in the house and buy something that I think she'll say if she gets here is, the idea is that all the things that they sell in the house are gonna be products that are made in Medina, and things that, you know, they can sell there, which is a great, you know, close to the square place for them to do business. So in effect, that is business, but it is nonprofit, so we're doing
I
it.
think a better term might be employment opportunities for a nonprofit.
Right, because it doesn't generate any tax dollars for the city.
Correct, correct.
But,
When we have to be careful with the property that it's not a for-profit. I'm sorry. I didn't mean
That's
to-
okay, I
Right,
was just
we
gonna say,
have to
and you're
pay taxes.
providing meaningful employment to folks who may not otherwise be able to have it. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
And I think,
And I'm hoping that with the bike rental, that they could maybe partner with Century Cycles, who,
Right.
if somebody rents a bike, they could end up going and buying a bike from Century
And we've
Cycles.
shared that with Diane already. Yes, sir.
There is some.
Now, are there plans to increase the size of the barn as well? or-
Double the size.
Now, how's that do with the whole,
Well-
footprint there and the limited space? That's what I'm just trying to.
Patrick and Greg and Tim, I think, met with Diane, the architect, and they rearranged some parking and
And drawing it's nice to see.
That'd be great.
came out quite,
What are
you
you
know,
doing all that brown
came
wood?
out good.
is that the replat I got here?
It's a little bit. Basically, you move the parking to the north side. Country Drive, free this up.
Now, we talked about having porous concrete. Is that still gonna be in the parking area, or is that gonna be, do we have any concerns being that close to the creek?
This was always this close to the creek.
That side was?
Yeah, we took,
Okay.
before we had parking on both sides here. So we just eliminated here, kind of put them up this way.
That make sense? You all right with that?
Oh, yeah, I think it's great.
All right, well,
It's all coming together.
anything else anybody wanna talk about while we're here at finance?
Like me to make a motion to go into executive session now?
Yeah, might as well.
Second.
We'll be recessing the executive session, not returning. All in favor of recessing the executive session?
I
All opposed? We're recessed.